Sippers, welcome to this episode of the Tea With Me podcast with me, Shane Todd. Before we get started, let me plug two things. Number one, I'm doing the SSE Arena in Belfast on the November. It's a date in November. I think it's the 6th, but if it's any other date, don't let that be the reason that you don't go. Big Mike's looking it up. Appreciate that. We're heading towards a sellout with that, which is genuinely incredible. So thanks to everybody that's already got a ticket. If you want to go, you can Ticketmaster, SSE Arena website. I mean, people say to me, 6th, legend. Genuine legend. The other thing I got to plug as well is Patreon. Patreon.com/Tea With Me podcast, where you sign up, support the podcast, get yourself loads of extra content. You know, it's a bit like sometimes if you go to a slightly older cousin's house when you're a kid and he's like, here, I'm throwing out all these clothes, do you want them? And you think it's just going to be like a jumper, but you go home stacked. You know what I mean? Like absolutely stacked. That's what I mean, you don't get clothes. It's not like that at all. It's not like that at all. You get bonus podcasts, you get video stuff, all different things. Go check it out, patreon.com/Tea With Me podcast. It's a guest episode today. My guest is none other than Mark Normand. Mark's just simply one of the funniest guys doing it at the minute, whether it's stand-up, sketches, when he's on podcasts, just a complete joke machine. I'm a big fan. Like, I'm weirdly a big fan of Mark Normand. You know, I just spend a lot of time watching him on YouTube through some... I share a breath, which makes this way creepier. But yeah, I'm just a big fan. I did some gigs in the Stand in New York, which I kind of crowbar into every single podcast that I do with anyone from outside of Northern Ireland. But I did some gigs there, and Mark was on the bill. Got to watch a couple of his sets, and the guy's just a complete joke machine, just very, very original comedian. And especially during COVID, like he was putting out a lot of sketches and stand-up spots in different places, doing stand-up to strangers, and I just think honestly this guy is just one of the funniest people out there at the minute. This is the Tea With Me episode with the absolutely brilliant Mark Normand. Mark, my first question I ask everybody that does the podcast is, are you a tea drinker? And if so, like what's the level of your tea drinking?
I never touch the stuff. I look at tea the same way I look at the name Muhammad. I can't believe it's the number one. Tea. I like an iced tea. Don't get me wrong. I like an iced tea, you know, on a sunny day or at an outdoor patio. But hot tea, I don't know. It just hot tea ruins the good water, if you ask me. No offense. I know your whole country's built on it, but
you said that like
know.
that phrase has that phrase has been used a million times, and I just nodded along like, oh yeah, that well known phrase. A cup of tea ruins the hot water. I like it, Mark.
Yeah.
You and I did a gig. The first time I became aware of Mark Normand was you opened for Bert Kreischer in Dublin.
Oh yeah.
And in my opinion, stole the show. It was really good. Me and my friend drove home. We were like, I like that guy. Then about a couple of months later, I was in London at the Soho Theatre, maybe looking to do some shows. And the guy that was showing us around said, Mark Normand's going to be here in a couple of months. And I said, he said Mark Normand. He said, Mark Normand's going to be here. I said, it's actually Mark Normand with a D. And the guy, no, it's not. And I was like, no, it genuinely is. And then he said, it isn't, to the point where I think if you had said, it is Mark Normand, I think he would have corrected you. I think it's definitely Normand.
Yeah, man. That gig, I was so looking forward to that gig. It was in June of 2020. And I remember COVID hit. And I was like, yeah, COVID hit, but we'll be fine by June.
Yeah.
Let's keep that one on the books. I made a bunch of posters. I made flyers. I promoted the hell out of it. And then...
Have you performed in the UK before? Like, have you done much over here?
I have. I opened for Amy Schumer there once, Kreischer in Manchester, and a couple other places. I love it. Good crowds. You don't get offended. You actually care about the joke and the wording of it instead of just looking for a problematic point. And, big fan.
And then I did some gigs in the Stand in New York just before COVID or like towards the end of the 2019. And you were on, and I was like, oh, this is class. Saw this guy in Dublin, fan of the podcast. We did the gig, and then I just need to get the subway home. I was staying in Times Square, and you and I walked out at exactly the same time of the gig, and I didn't know where I was going. I was like, maybe I could just ask. And I was like, Mark, I was on the show. I'm trying to get to Times Square. And you said, I know where to go. Follow me. And then we walked down to the subway. And then you happened to be also on the platform I was on. And I was like, one of us is going to have to jump in front of this train because you clearly think that I'm like following you here. And just to let you know that I'm not, I was very close to just pushing one of us in front of an oncoming train. But then it was fine. You realized you were on the wrong platform and you just went into the night.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to make sure you got home there, Fatty. I don't want some limey coming over here and hating America. So I had to make sure you got home safe. In New York, you don't want to get Me Too'd out there in the subway. So yeah, glad you got home safe. And
yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, it's fun to have the foreigners come in and do some comedy.
Yeah, it was definitely like a big eye opener doing New York compared to some other places. New York was just the best, like out of the American cities that I've been for comedy, and it's about the material. I've had like Joe List you do the podcast with. He's been on this last week, and yeah, we were just chatting about how in a lot of places especially like LA, it's all about presentation. Well, a lot of it is about presentation and your outfit and that kind of thing. Whereas in New York, people are wearing garbage bags and just doing great gags. So I really liked it. I had a great time. I want to ask you a little bit about how you got into stand-up, because I don't know anything about your kind of early comedy career. Listen to the podcast now and really enjoyed the special Out to Lunch and things like that. But how did you get started in stand-up? Because when you get started stand-up here, where I live in Northern Ireland, so you just say you do stand-up and then you're just a comedian, and there's only about 14 of us, so it's a kind of easier ride. But how did it all start for you?
First of all, that sounds way better. I mean, comedy in America is blown up with Netflix and YouTube. Everything's viral now. Fucking some Instagram queef is now more famous than Eddie Murphy. So I think the 14 people doing it, you guys are a close-knit group. You know everybody. You can hang out with everybody, and it's more underground and niche. That's what comedy's supposed to be. It's supposed to be kind of this punk rock thing where a bunch of people go down in a basement, talk about their dick for half an hour, and then get drunk. But it's become this crazy pop mainstream thing. But yeah, I got started. I was working at a Mexican restaurant in Louisiana, and I had nothing going on, no prospects, no goals. I was failing out of college. And I had a friend who was a waiter, and he said, I'm going to do an open mic. You should come with me. You're a funny guy. And I said, what the hell? I can't do that. And he said, yeah, just try it. We'll get drunk. We'll drive out there and, write 5 minutes of material. And I bombed, and it was super fun. And I just fell in love. And after that, I was looking through the phone book. Where's the next comedy club? What's the next mic? And then before you know it, you got a list of mics. Thursday it's here, and Friday it's here. And then it became my whole world. And I said, I'm moving to New York.
Do you think if that guy hadn't have said to you, you would never have done stand-up? You were never thinking of it beforehand, or like close to it, or?
I mean, I was kind of a theater kid when I was younger, and I loved comedy, and I could quote all the movies, and I watched SNL every week, and I knew Seinfeld and Chris Rock and all that. But like, I don't know, it was like being an astronaut. It was so far away from my shitty, dumb lifestyle that I couldn't even grasp the idea of doing it. So I used to go to open mics and just watch. And I would be like, I'll sign up, but I was too scared and I would walk away. So I needed that nudge, and the friend going with me helped. So who knows? That's a good question. It's tough to say.
I appreciate that. Thanks. I mean, how great would it be if you went back to track that guy down and they were like, he never worked. There was no such person.
Yeah, he died.
He just
40 years ago. Yeah.
But he got so many people into stand-up. Yeah, I mean, there's more than 14 comedians here, but it is good because you can like quickly get into it, and then you can just meet comedians. You could like, it is a small scene, but then we don't have like any weekend clubs. So when I went to New York, the idea of doing, guys like yourself that were, you just come from doing 2 gigs that night, we met in the stand, then you were like going to do another one. Like here, it's like, you do a gig on a Wednesday, and then you kind of just chill for a couple of weeks, and then it's like, better start making my way to that next show. So there's definitely like pros and cons in it.
Sure. Good point.
When you moved to New York, like New York to me is like the comedy. Well, I kind of thought LA was comedy capital of the world, and then I went to New York. I was like, nah, this is definitely where it is. Like the
LA
Cellar.
is high school. Yeah, New York's comedy college. It's like a university, but LA is like who's hottest, who's got cool sneakers.
Yeah.
but New York is like, let's hear some jokes.
Yeah, and just even like the style of presentation was just way more like less showy and like everybody just was leaning against the brick wall, kind of, just whereas in LA comedians are on hoverboards and skateboarding up and down the stage and all
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But and it's great. Like, I mean, I went to the Comedy Cellar and had big flashbacks because the worst gig I ever did was the Comedy Cellar in Vegas, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Oh yeah.
I was on my honeymoon, and I said to my wife, I was like, "Listen, if I can get a gig here in Vegas, can I go and do it?" She's like, "Yeah, no problem." I went, did the Comedy Cellar, which I thought was just the Comedy Cellar. I was like, I've heard so many, everyone's come through here. Like, who knows who's going to be on the bill tonight? And I went and did it, wore shorts for the first time. I was just in holiday mode, and it was the lady who owns the cellar, who's like really like well known or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like really old. She was there to watch. Esty was there, and Esty was like, "I really like that you're just on holiday and you just, you're just addicted to comedy." And I was like, "I'm gonna get past tonight on my holiday in shorts." And it was just I just did the worst gig. I just was in no way prepared for it. I'd spent the day by the pool, and it was so I booked to do an open spot at the early show, and I went up and I was like, "Esty," I was like, "That's not a representation of my stand-up. Is there any way I could just stay on and do the late show with a different set?" And she was like, "Shh, somebody's on stage." Okay. I just had to leave.
Sounds like her.
Ruined the honeymoon,
What was your lady like? What the hell are we doing here? I'm trying to get drunk by the pool in Vegas, and you want to do your dumb dick jokes at this club? What the hell's going on here?
Pretty much. Luckily, we met friends when we were in Vegas who were already there, so she was able to hang out with them. And then the best thing was when we were in San Diego, she took a migraine, and I got to go do the American Comedy Company or something like that.
Yeah, good club
beside the hotel, and it was great. Jeff Dye was on. Do you know?
Oh yeah, he's handsome.
Yeah, he's a good-looking guy. It was fun. I got him a Starbucks. He saw me with the Starbucks, and in between shows, he's like, "Where'd you get that?" I was like, "Oh, just around the corner." And he asked me like a lot of questions about the Starbucks. Then I was like, "I think he's asking me to go and get him a coffee." So I went and got him a coffee, and it was a good time. When you first moved to New York, did you move as a stand-up, or was it like, let me work a job and I'll do stand-up on the side, or were you just going for comedy?
I mean, I was 22, 23. I had nothing going on. So I obviously had to get a job just to support the rent in New York. So I probably had a job for 6 years.
Okay.
And then I finally could make enough money doing stand-up to get off the job. But it was still dicey. I mean, it was check to check, dollar pizza, drink tickets, just trying to stay alive, living in Manhattan or living in Brooklyn. So yeah, I wasn't making a lot of money, but now things are going okay. But man, it was a rough road. I got mugged a few times, got bed bugs, a lot of bombing, a lot of meltdowns, a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
But hey, it was a fun ride.
Yeah, I mean, where I'm from, when people say a lot of bombing, it's a totally different thing. We have a very tense political situation, but comedy bombing actually in a way sometimes worse. I want to like ask you about stand up and things like that. But since lockdown, like I've seen like way more stuff from you, and very original things as well, where you're just sort of thinking outside the box and taking advantage of like an empty Manhattan and doing different shows and videos. And was that kind of something almost that you made a conscious effort to do? Like, you're like, "Oh, I'm going to do more video type thing," or were you just kind of fed up and like just wanting to get out and do things?
Well, I mean, I was the 4 sets a night guy, and then it just went from 4 to 0, cold turkey. No, all the clubs are closed. You can't get out. So I still had that work ethic, that drive going. So I said, well, let's figure out, you got to adapt. So I said, let's put that into something. So let's make something fun. Oh, I've been doing sets in the park. Let's film that. Oh, I'm doing a set on a roof. Let's film that. I can run around Manhattan on my scooter and, swim in the Central Park pond. Let's film that. So I was just trying to stay relevant because I was really cooking for the first time in my career. Right when this thing hit, I was finally selling out. I did a couple Rogans. I met Seinfeld. I did some Tonight shows. I had a special coming out. So it was like all these great things were happening, and then it just got pulled from under me. So I wanted to keep that momentum. So I started making crazy content.
Yeah, like this time last year, all that fast forward a year, you're doing shows in a park and in a phone
I
box, and
know.
you're doing this podcast.
Right. It's all brutal. It's all shit. I'm fucked, but I think we're coming out of it. And I hope the world just pushes pause on our careers. And then when
Yeah.
the whole world opens up, I can just hit play again and go right back to it.
Well, like the great thing about here is like the demand for tickets is almost like more than it was before all
Right.
this. Like people like way ahead of time or wanting to come and see shows, and it's like putting on extra shows, but then you just don't know when it's going to be. Like
Yeah.
yeah, like you said about putting stuff back at the start. You were like the UK shows. I was putting stuff back, being like, let's like be way over the top and put it back to like March this year. You know, now that feels like, well, that's just not going to happen. So I don't think I've scheduled anything until like October, November, and even then, I'm like, you know, I don't know who's going to get to go, but or if we have to do
Right.
like 50% capacity, because that's the thing I loved about those New York comedy clubs. It was like basement venues, and everybody was like packed in, whereas
Yep.
spread out and stuff might work in other places, but I don't know in New York. Like, what's the current sort of situation there with clubs?
Well, New York is fucked more than most places. I don't know why, but we can't even go inside now. You can't even go inside a restaurant. You got to be sitting on the sidewalk. So they tried some sidewalk shows, but now it's freezing cold. Then you get the heater out, but it's only actually warm 2 inches away from the heater. So they've kind of cut it off. We do a couple roof shows, but there's a few tents that pull it off, but it's just not great. But you go to the South, Florida, Texas, they're wide open. Arizona. So a lot of us have been flying around
Yeah,
and doing that stuff, just trying to pay the rent.
yeah, business. Yeah, it definitely seemed from an outside in point of view that like 2 days after COVID, that like places like Arizona and Texas were like, hey, let's just get things going again,
Yeah.
like straight away.
Oh, yeah. They don't care. And then, I mean, look, I'm a cunt and I don't know anything about science, but California's been locked down for the whole time and now they're spiking.
Yeah,
Florida's been open the whole time and I think they're spiking, but you kind of start to think, well, what's the difference? You guys were locked down, we're open, we're both sick, but at least we're having fun sick.
do you think if every comedian moves out of New York eventually, you'll just wait it out and just be the guy, just be the comedian in New York?
I don't know. I mean, that terrifies me because if all the comics move out, then a lot of the clubs will close because there won't be enough comics. So who the hell knows? I'm just praying to God the city bounces back. There's all these theories about what's going to happen. And New York can't die. It's the greatest city in the world, blah, blah, blah. But like,
Yeah.
sure, I guess. But I hope they're right. Who
They
knows?
they probably said that about somewhere else a long time ago, and like no one lives in that place anymore.
Yeah, they said that about Rome. Rome will be fine. It's coming back. And then, everybody's getting raped.
Yeah, Rome isn't. Rome is okay. I don't know if you've been, but I got kicked out of a Hard Rock cafe in Rome, and that's what I take away from it. Where
Ah,
I'm like, there's culture and there's things to see, but at the Hard Rock, they're unclear about certain policies.
yeah, I went to Rome and look, the Vatican's cool and all that, but like I had way more fun in the other towns in Italy.
Yeah, yeah. With stand up, I mean, what I love most about your podcast, the podcast that you do with Joe, is you guys are very open about industry kind of chat. Talking about like the inner workings of the job and what's going on for you. And you put a special, something I was really like into hearing about was you just put a special like out on YouTube, but explained that you'd sort of shopped it around, you've taken it to places, but maybe you got like a bit pissed off and just put it up.
Yeah.
It seems to me in Ireland, like watching it, where I'm like, how could you not get a major deal with a big streaming service when, like you say, before COVID, you're blowing up, going on Rogan, that kind of thing. It just feels like no brainer, and that's when I was in the stand watching other comedians, I'm like, why do 6 of these guys not have huge specials out right now, and why am I seeing specials from the same people
Yeah.
over and over again? I thought the process, I guess, would be a lot easier. I thought it was like, do you want this? Yeah, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, you'd think, but look, I get it. But I think A, there's way more comics now. B, we need diversity. C, I'm not famous. That guy, Joe List, isn't famous. All these people aren't famous. So Netflix is going, why would I book them? And people go, they're pretty funny. And they go, that's not enough. I need
Yeah.
views. I need people to watch. So I'll book Rob Schneider,
Yeah.
and at least he's a known name. Whereas you're not. You're like, yeah, but Rob Schneider sucks at stand up. I know, but he's a name. So then you go, well, all right, so how about some integrity there, Netflix? And they go, integrity. We have Dave Chappelle, Jerry Seinfeld, Bill Burr, Chris Rock, and you're like, all right, you got me there. So they kind of covered their bases, but what do they get out of giving, Joe List a special? They don't get much. They get to go, hey, look, we know about the young guys coming up, but that doesn't mean anything to them. They're still a business. So I get it. But on the flip side, I love that I put it on YouTube and it has over 5 million views. And I know that they are aware of that. And that makes me feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like those numbers are great. Like Sam Morrill or Morrill. I mean, he's doing I need to figure that out very quickly, whether it's Morrill or Morrill, because he's doing the podcast like next week. Also, I really fucked up with him because I sent out an Instagram to also, like, I was asking like a couple of comedians come to the podcast. I was like, I'll go down the Instagram DM. I don't know these people, but I'll send a DM. And I mailed Chelsea Peretti, and then I emailed Sam straight after. But I forgot that I was no longer messaging Chelsea Peretti. So I messaged Sam and said, hey, Chelsea, I'll get you on. A big long message, and he just wrote back Chelsea ? And I was like, I'm just gonna have to be honest there. I was like, Sam, I fucked this up. Please don't do the podcast. I'm so sorry.
Oh, come on. He'll do it. He's a prickly guy, but he's gonna do it.
He's gonna do it.
All right.
I'll call him Chelsea the whole time. It'll be something between us.
Yeah, just keep it as Peretti, not Handler.
Yeah,
let's not be insulting.
Yeah. I mean, the special's done so well, like over 5 million, which is incredible. And does that make you like think more about just straight away going down the independent route? Not even thinking about these people first.
Yeah, I mean, part of me says, yeah, fuck you. It's like the supermodel that turned you down, but now you're dating Kardashian or whatever. So a part of me is kind of like, yeah, blow me. But then look at a guy like Schultz, who couldn't get any attention from the industry, and then he put that killer news thing on YouTube, and now they bought his thing. So you're like, is that the win? What's the win? But yeah. Look, YouTube is awesome, but the money is so good, and it would be kind of cool to have both. Like, I got a YouTube special and I got a Netflix special, and I got the Netflix from the YouTube, so that's kind of cool too. So I don't know. That's a good question. I guess we'll see what happens. I probably won't buy anything again, so I might end up back on YouTube in a couple of years. But I love that YouTube is there, and it's a game changer, and I think the industry is stupid because they're making their own competition. Like, we're only going to YouTube because they won't have us. And now there's so much great killer content on YouTube. And they're like, well, there's no money in it. It's like, yeah, but the money's on the road. I feel like YouTube is what podcasting was 10 years ago. Yeah. 10 years ago, I told my agent, hey, I'm going to do this guy Segura's podcast. And he would go, what does that pay? And you're like, it doesn't pay anything, but a lot of people hear it. And he goes, fuck that. Go to Chuckles Hut in Ohio. And you're like, yeah, but this'll be better. And they're like, no. And that's the same with YouTube. Sure, it doesn't pay, but it gets eyeballs.
Today is the day of the inauguration that we're recording this. It's literally happening now. From a comedian's point of view, if you're sitting in the apartment, you haven't been able to do shows, you get a phone call, the White House, they're like, Mark, come down, drop a little bit of a set for us. Oh. Are you going to do it? And would you agree to rein it in?
I would do it in a heartbeat, and I just did the Tonight Show, so I would just do those jokes because they're already pre-approved and clean.
Right.
So, and I got some killer Biden zingers that are pretty clean that I would throw out there. Oh God, that'd be a huge break. Hell yeah! I mean, I got to follow Lady Gaga, but that's fine. I can roast her a little bit.
Yeah, but that's the temptation though. Like doing that, you get a little bit carried away with the occasion. And just start riffing a little bit. And I mean, that would be the best thing, probably, wouldn't it? To like go a little bit off script, make a little bit of a faux pas, and that's it. But yeah, I mean,
oh, dude, that'd be. You walk up, you go, sorry, I'm a little late. I was doing Blow with Hunter Biden there. I mean, how great would that be? That would go viral.
The only person who'd be laughing would be Hunter Biden. Like, I think he'd appreciate it. I think he'd definitely appreciate it.
Definitely. Oh, he'd be laughing, and a little blood would come out of his nose. Good times.
Yeah, I mean, all that kind of thing is like the side of things where like you've got to work clean for like the TV chat shows, all that kind of thing. Like that's something like I've thought about is trying to do that kind of, that 5-minute clean slot on the big talk shows. Do you find that difficult to just kind of work clean like that and that sort of thing, or is it just a natural enough sort of thing for you?
I think it's going clean. It's not, you've seen Out to Lunch. I got school shooting. I got abortion. I got trans. I got race. So I don't really work clean, but I can go clean. I think it's a good muscle to exercise. It's like MMA. Sure, you could be a good striker, but you got to know how to wrestle and you got to know how to grapple and all that stuff. So I think any tool, the more tools in your belt, the better. So if you just
Yeah.
can't go clean, I would try to work on it, just for an exercise, just be a more well-rounded comedian.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you like, say you get booked for like a corporate, for example, they've said like, listen, you got to keep it like a little bit clean or whatever. If it's not working, will you just go to the dark side, or will you stay on track? Let me very quickly interrupt the podcast just to tell you a bit about our sponsor.
Yeah.
Why? Because I kicked that? Fuck off, Dan. Let me tell you a little bit about our sponsor. Keep it in. Manscaped.com. Manscaped is the number one in below the belt men's grooming. Not above the belt. Okay, you can do like the little, what do you call that bit of hair between your belly button and your piece?
Treasure trail.
Treasure trail. Thank you, doctor. Your treasure trail. Michael Foster, MD. It's below the belt, but if you want to go above the belt, you can do, but that's a little bit off piece. What you want to do is go below the belt. You know where I'm talking about. I'm not talking about your legs. I'm not talking about your toes. I'm talking about your pubs. No. Your pubes, not your pubs. You can shave your pubs if you want. I'm talking about your pubes. It's the taboo subject. No one's talking about it. It's 2021. Let's just get involved. Let's talk about it. Let's cancel pubes. Can we do that? Cancel culture. Let's cancel pubes. Pubes are blacklisted. Let's get rid of them. Manscaped.com, providing the best men's grooming products. Shavers, wipes, toner, moisturizer, all of it. The weed whacker for your nose and ear hair. And their number one product, in my opinion, which is the Lawnmower 3.0, which certainly keeps me tight and honest. I used it. Producer Dan uses it. Big Mike's new to it. And honestly, it's changed his life because his pubic hair, let me tell you this, was holding him back. Mainly because he kept showing it to people and saying, what can I do about this? And he's found the answer, which is manscaped.com. Use the code TWITHME for 20% off and free shipping. Have a look on the website, see what's happening. Pop in Tea with Me, 20% off, free shipping. It's a good time. Pubes, you're cancelled. As are pubs. Literally.
I try to stay on track because it's usually in the contract. So I'm just thinking about the paycheck. Look, this is a shit gig. I'm in a tuxedo. You guys are all 78 years old and millionaires. So I'll just bomb and eat it and take the money and run. But I've done it before where you go dirty and it's not like that helps. They went from bombing to now they are mad at you. Too.
You're just now like a rude guy to bombs.
Yeah, exactly. I had a college gig once and it was supposed to be clean and I was bombing so bad and I was mad because these kids were like texting and they were making fun of me. So I just started making fun of them and I got fired and sent home and I got like yelled at. I got a horrible email. I was like, look at this kid. He's clearly a virgin. That guy's got a boner. Hey, she's fingering herself, whatever. And it was working, but I didn't get paid, so it was like I lost $2,000 or whatever. So it's not worth it.
The colleges thing is something I can believe when I hear American comedians talking about like the college circuit, which I would assume is way more of like a liberal thing, free reign.
Oh yeah.
Say what you want, it's you can work dirty or whatever. But it seems that like that there in America, the college circuit is where you got to be like your cleanest, like the safest almost. Unless I have that wrong.
Yeah,
because that baffles me.
I know. I mean, that's what I don't get. When I was a kid, he like jizz in my mouth, fuck my asshole, bang my mom. It was all fun. Like the kids are supposed to be the fun ones, rock and roll, and then the old people are going, hey, turn that racket down. That's how it used to be. And now it's flipped. Now old crowds are loving it. And younger crowds are like, did you say gay? And you're like, yeah, my roommate's gay. They're like, how dare you? You're like, that's not even a negative. You're just looking for something. You pipsqueak. So I think it's just part of their culture now is to like fish out some kind of injustice or what's problematic or whatever, and they're not even listening. They're just hearing buzzwords.
If you guys have a bad show in America, say you're on the road, you got to kind of sit in that for a while and you're away from home and you just got to kind of travel around having done a bad show. Good thing about living here is the furthest away I can go is like 2.5 hours. So if I have a bad one, like I can be home by 11.
Yeah.
It's like if you have like you're never stuck on the road, like maybe going through like a series of bad gigs. Like
Yeah.
you're at home every night for a decent hour. But the thing with like uni gigs here, like college gigs here, used to be like the complete bear pits. Like it was like anything goes. And then definitely like the big university gig we have here got a lot more like sort of PC, and like I had friends who you would consider like clean comedians that got like a little bit of a telling off after shows. And I don't know whether that will carry through. So when like the generation like younger than us, when they're like the age of people that are going to the comedy club,
Right.
like, are comedy clubs going to be different, or is it just a couple of years thing that we're going through?
That's a great. I wonder about that literally every day. Is this a fad or is this just this is the world now? Because I think it just keeps ship shifting into a different thing. Like you couldn't say Negro, and now you couldn't. Then you could say colored, but now you can't say colored. But you can't say people of color. So just the rules are all still there. They just keep changing. Like what's the
Yeah,
difference calling somebody colored and a person of color? There's no real difference. But that's just the times we're living in now. Is like that's the way you say it. That's status quo, and you're like, all right. So I think you can still tiptoe around and dodge those laser beams. You just got to keep playing the game and keep learning, which is so fucking frustrating and exhausting. Because you're like, I got to learn the new language. It's not transvestite now; it's transgender and all that. And you're like, look, it's all just letters in a certain order. Like you're the one who says what my intent is, but for some reason you get to choose that, whatever. But like yeah, you just got to keep learning it, and then you can twist it your own way. But it is fucking exhausting.
what's
And
the
just say what you want anyway. Who gives a fuck?
what's the worst road experience you've had? Like, have you had a disaster? Like, cause you guys, so what we go and do here is, even if you're like on tour or whatever, you just go do like a Thursday night gig somewhere. They're all one-off type things.
Yeah.
But where you guys do comedy clubs, you could be booked through like Thursday to Sunday. So is there ever a case of like you go to a club that maybe you've never been to before and it's so shit, but you've got to be there for like
Oh yeah.
4 shows, two a night? Like that must be hard to get yourself up for that.
Yeah, yeah. That's just part of the game. I mean, it's still a job. You're still there to entertain people. You're getting paid. So Thursday, you show up and you're like, man, this town sucks. This club sucks. The crowd sucks. I'm bombing. The hotel stinks. And then but you go, I got 2 more days. You get drunk. You do some drugs. You might meet a fat lady or whatever. And then you go home. It's not the end of the world. And plus, you go to a shitty hotel. You can kind of just trash the place and make the most of it. Like you become trashier in this trashy town. Then you go home and you turn back into the real normal you. So I think the road is a little romantic. I kind of like it. I mean, I don't want to bomb and do a shitty club, but it's just kind of part of it. Some clubs are great, some clubs suck, and
Yeah.
that's the name of the game.
And you kind of had I guess, probably a great moment for your career in a way on the road when you did a morning spot on like a TV news thing, where
Yeah.
I guess part of being on the road there, which we wouldn't have here, is you go on local radio or TV like on the day of the show or the weekend of the show, and you kind of just did things in a very different way, where you just kind of just had fun with it and probably just maybe got bored of giving the same stock answers to questions
Yeah.
like you looking forward to the show, and you kind of just you kind of just really had fun. And
Yeah.
that clip, when that clip kind of came out, did that have a big like, did you notice like a little bit of a boom when that happened?
I did, and that's rare for me. I was just doing the road, doing Conan, doing Fallon, doing Colbert, whatever I could do, and nothing was really catching. Like that's kind of also a sign of the times is these late nights. I was like, oh, I'm doing Conan, but nobody gives a fuck. But then you do this shit, and it went kind of viral, and so yeah, that was a big eye opener for me. Like, hey, these TV things aren't really that big of a deal, but if you do something interesting and outside the box and it catches online, that's the future. But yeah, it was the big credits to that lady. She really like rolled with the punches
Yeah,
and never got upset and never cut me off and just let me be funny. And because I've done that before 100 other ones, and
Right,
the,
right,
the
I get
women
you.
were like, "Oh my god!" Blah, and it just ruined it. But she
Yeah.
rolled with it, and that's really what saved it.
And I think that is what kind of would make someone want to come and see a show. I don't want to come and see a
Right.
show based on someone being like, "Yeah, it's a great
Yes.
town. I love your landmarks and that kind of
Exactly.
thing."
It's a horrible system. It's like, hey, you're a funny guy, but be funny for this show, but not actually funny. Like, just walk the line. And you're like, well, why am I here? Well, you're trying to sell tickets.
Yeah,
Okay, so I won't be that funny and I'll be behaved. Who wants to see a behaved comic? What the
yeah,
hell are we doing? So it's a horrible system. So yeah, if you can break through and rip your shirt off like Kreischer or Bobby Lee will lick a lady's face,
yeah.
do what you got to do to sell those tickets.
Yeah, I'll just lie in press interviews now, but with one subtle lie. So I'll just drop, just for myself, I'll drop it in. Like the last one was archery. It's like like any passions away from stand up. I've never like done archery in my life. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
archery is the passion, like archery, then comedy. I said, like, oh, I nearly made the Olympics team for Ireland, like in 2004, whenever it was, and like really talked about how much I love archery. And nobody will pick up on that, that's at least a way for me to stay interested
yes,
in the interview or in the piece. But like you say, like going on a podcast now is the new late night talk show, and
yeah, completely.
even
And
I mean,
Joe Rogan is the new Johnny Carson that
yeah,
can ignite your career.
we had so we have where I live BBC Northern Ireland, which is like our local version of BBC. Like you might have like Fox News, but or a news channel based in a certain place.
Yeah,
And I did like my first like network thing this year. So like on all BBC in like London and Scotland, all that kind of thing. It was a stand-up spot. And I thought like this will be great. And the taping went really well. And there's just people just don't really see it. And I put out a
yeah,
podcast. If I put out a podcast clip, it will probably get more interaction. Just one clip or even like a tweet or a silly photo sometimes will get people more interested than a traditional like here I am doing stand up on TV. The only
oh yeah,
person the only person who really tweeted about it was this like we have like a DIY TV presenter called Nick Knowles who's like 58. I've never met him in my life. He was the only guy who was like, "Hey, I love it." That's like this is bizarre, I was like, "Come on."
yeah,
I was like, "Give him a follow on Twitter." He just never followed me back. He just wanted to tell me that, and that made it okay. But let me ask you, if like with lockdown and stuff and going down the like independent route, doing things more for yourself, are there any projects like a bit like left of field that you would really like to do, like maybe some sort of movie or I don't know, even something slightly outside of comedy? Like, has this time changed you, like as a creative type person at all?
No, not really. I'm still just a silly goose. I just want to make funny stuff. I look. I majored in documentary filmmaking in college, and I love a good doc. I love a good like Netflix is those. I don't know if you saw Night Stalker, all
I'm
that.
about to
Those like
start it.
yeah, it's great. Those web series. I like anything kind of informative. This guy on HBO has a show called How To with John Wilson or How to Do Something with John Wilson. I love it. I just like anything weird and it's funny, but you also learn something. So I'm working on some stuff like that now. I can't tell you too much, but I'm sure it won't get picked up. But
No, no,
yeah, I'm
like,
working on two shows.
whatever we say here, I don't think we'll make it to like international news. So like, you could drop anything here. You could drop
All
anything.
right. All right. Well, I'm working on a puppet show about
Yeah.
America, and literally, I know it sounds
Okay.
silly, but I'm doing a puppet show because I'm so scared of you watch Family Guy or The Simpsons, they can get away with so much.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So I'm doing with puppets and saying horrible things and doing
Excellent.
offensive jokes with puppets. That's one thing I'm working on. That's going pretty well actually, and then I'm working on another thing about how people craft a joke, and I'm talking like Jim Gaffigan or Jimmy Carr or Hannibal, like bigger names, how they write a joke, and it's kind of a web series thing, and that's looking pretty good too. So we got some things in the pipeline, but we need the goddamn world to open up to
Yeah,
sell anything.
I think that crafting a joke, like I've been doing stand up since I was like 18, and like because we have a smaller scene here. Probably in like New York years, I've maybe been doing it for like 7 or 8, but here it's like 14 years or whatever.
Right, right.
And I've always written the same way. And then at the start of COVID and lockdown, It's the first time I ever really took any sort of break from stand-up. And then when I went back to it, I'm now writing in a different way that I never have. But I didn't make an effort to like, oh, I need to change the way I write. It just happened.
Yeah.
And I never thought I would change the way I wrote. I was always into like stories, you know, like actual stories that had happened. And now it's a little bit more, well, let me look into like what could have happened, you know, that kind of thing. Like what if this had
Interesting.
happened? It's just shifted for me. And that like most of my friends that do stand up haven't like written at all over lockdown because
Yeah.
we have no gigs here. And I don't think I would have, but because I've now like found like a new formula that's maybe going to work for me, I'm writing more now than I ever have, just because, you know, I've like hit on this thing. So
Yeah. That's great.
I mean, maybe I'm like, I've written an hour, maybe I'll try it, and none of it will work. And I was like, let me go back to the way I was writing before, you
Yeah,
know.
but
But
whatever's working for you at the moment, and that's a good sign that you could shift like that, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know. You might sell a TV show, but you still want to do stand up. So you have only a certain amount of time to write, and you got to
yeah,
make it work. So you always have to adapt. And I think that's a good sign. Like, I used to get up 4 times a night, 3 times a night, and now I can't, obviously. So I had to, but I still want to produce material.
yeah,
And I like to produce it working it out on stage and seeing what clicks and what doesn't. And now that I can't do that, I kind of have to write more straight page to stage. You know,
yeah,
like
yeah.
I used to write a little bit on the page and then take it up there and see what happens. And now I'm forcing myself to do more page to stage. And it's a shift. It's like you said, but you got to do it.
Part of it was being in New York and seeing how good like the punchlines were and how regular the punchlines were. I was going up with so you know, if you're doing like a 5 minute spot in the stand, for example, I was going with like one 5 minute bit. But then I was noticing
Mm,
that like because there's more punchlines here, because stand up's a little bit different. If people weren't hooked in the first 30 seconds of the
yeah.
story,
Yeah.
I wasn't getting them in at all. So in between sets there, I was like, let me do loads of shorter bits together, and it just worked way better. So I was
Yeah.
like, you know, maybe for shorter sets that definitely works better than what the
Yeah.
one very long story.
But
Because
see,
like,
that's a good sign also, that you just saw that and you're like, all right, I gotta tweak something. Something's not right. A lot of people just go, you don't like my shit, fuck you, you suck, you don't get me. But you actually
no,
absorbed it and changed it. That's a good sign too.
yeah, but the first gig after lockdown, I will be saying that when my new technique doesn't work, I went, fuck you guys, you're shit
Yeah.
crowd, shit
Yeah, I
audience.
think I think we all will. But give it a few tries. And look, the audience is rusty too. So they're gonna
Yeah,
be
yeah.
like, it's like when you don't jerk off for 6 months and then your dick touches a piece of felt and you go, it's going to be like that too.
Yeah. I mean, for New York, for travel and now and that kind of thing, international travel, do you just as a comedian have to like just take it as it comes at the minute? Like, can you make long-term plans and say, you know, let me go to Australia next year, that kind of thing? Or is it just, let's just get stand up back?
Yeah, let's just get stand up back. I mean, I think I will do the international thing. Like I did the Melbourne Fest, did like the Burt Kreischer opening and a couple Louis C.K. gigs, a couple other gigs back in the day. So I love international stuff, but it is a bitch, just like how long the flights are and setting everything up and getting off the plane and not knowing what the fuck to do. Your phone doesn't work, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I do love it though. But what was that place in Dublin I did? The Vic?
Yeah, oh, Vicker Street. Yeah,
Vicker Street.
what a
What
nice
a
theater.
what a venue that was. I fell in love with that place. I didn't want to leave. We did 2 shows there, and I didn't want
Yeah.
to leave. I mean, then we got drunk in the green room. Then we hit that strip right there outside of Dublin. I remember getting drunk with everybody from the
Temple Bar.
show. Yeah, and then Burt Kreischer showed up with like 10 pizza boxes, and we all went to town. It was, man, great visit.
The great thing about Vicker Street is I'd played Vicker Street once. So I'm in Northern Ireland, Belfast, our capital. Dublin, where that is like a 2 hour drive away. But I opened for a friend there, and the best thing about that, it just feels like somebody's like front room in their house.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
way it's set up, like it's so nice. But yeah, I was gonna that answers my question. I was gonna ask you about your time in Dublin. Like, did you have the proper Dublin experience of, you know, like all the bars, walk around them, do that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I did the Vodafone
Vodafone
Fest.
Festival, yeah, yeah,
I did that a couple of years, and that was the shit. That was like where I saw Dublin, walked around, saw the whole town, and went to all the museums and the canal thing going through, and went to downtown, and I loved it. And I loved the festival was great, and Colin Quinn is there and all these other greats. So yeah, that was fun. That was when I really explored. Love that town.
Yeah, there's nothing I love more than being in a new city with comedy and just walking around.
Yes.
Just going for a walk with no plan and just seeing it.
Yeah, and then you get 10 minutes. You start seeing stuff as a fish out of water, and you get like 5 minutes of material. Then you open with that, and they go,
Yeah.
"Oh shit, how do you know about that thing?" And you're like, "Yeah," and you feel like a pro.
Yeah, I want to ask you two last things. You mentioned Joe Rogan's podcast. What is the experience of like going to do that podcast from a logistical point of view? Like people, the way I see it, are like flying into Texas to do it, which just doesn't sound right for a podcast that someone's like being flown in to do it. So do you like get like, does a guy pick you up in the airport and you got to go through this like fortress, all these security checks,
No.
is it more like way more laid back than that?
Way more like, I mean, he's a laid back guy, but it's very similar to how it was in LA, weirdly enough. Like Joe's got his crazy mansion in the hills or whatever the hell on some lake with a pool and yada yada. It's $1 zillion.
Yeah.
But he always has his warehouse kind of outside of town, and it's got like a boxing ring, a gym, car collection, a vape thing, and a big coffee machine, a pool table. It's like a kind of a man thing. And then he's got in that warehouse is a podcast studio. So I landed in Texas, and I was late because my flight was delayed. So right when I land, my phone clicks on. He goes, "Where the hell are you?" And I was like, "Oh, shit, my flight was delayed." And he's got 38 things to do in a day. So he's like, "You're throwing my whole day off." He's like, "Get your ass over here. Here's the address." So I get in an Uber. I give him the address. The guy's listening to Rogan in the Uber. And I was like, oh wow. And I go, "Hey, Joe, how crazy is this?" The guy's listening to you, and he goes, "Don't tell him where you're going, you fucking." I was like, "Oh, shit, you're right. So he caught me there, and then I show up at his warehouse. It's very, what's the word? Discreet. It's just mirrored glass. It says "for rent" on top. It's got a parking lot. It just looks very bland.
Yeah.
And then you kind of look in the windows, and you're like, "Is this it?" It doesn't look right. And then some Navy SEAL pops the door open. He's got a big beard, bunch of tattoos, ripped, tiny T-shirt. And he goes, "Get in here, you fucking homo." And then you go in and say hello, and the mics heat up, and that's it. Oh, he gives you a COVID test first, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd said that about podcasting 10 years ago, like you're gonna get a blood test before you go in. Yeah, I mean, I love that. I like to think in my mind that you brought the Uber driver with you and just all his friends.
Yeah, he didn't speak any English, but yeah, it was fun, and it's nerve-wracking, but he's such a normal guy. Like, you think this guy's an MMA commentator, a millionaire, a podcast fucking mogul, and then he's just this regular dude.
Yeah, I mean, and you must notice, like, once you do that podcast, like, just how that brings you to everybody's attention.
Yeah, it's not what it used to be, but yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like your analytics on the internet just go from here to whoop, and then like that. It's crazy.
Yep. So in like, so doing that podcast, kind of do like, you must do 50 podcasts a week, like
Sure.
legitimately a massive amount of podcasts. What percentage do you feel that podcasting is kind of like doing stand up a little bit? Like, do you think it's like 3% of like maybe doing stand up? Or do you think it's zero?
Yeah.
Or are you like, no, nothing?
I mean, I think it's another muscle, but I've definitely gotten bits out of just talking that I wouldn't have gotten while writing.
Yeah.
You do get some jokes out of it, and it's a hell of a skill that I think you should be honing. Anybody who's starting comedy now, like, start a pod just so you know how to talk into a microphone. Nothing worse than some guy on a podcast like, "So, yeah, what else?" And you're like, "What, are you kidding?" I mean, it's still a performance in a way. I mean, you shouldn't be too on, but it's still, you're still trying to entertain and be interesting, at least. There's people listening to this. So, Jesus, put some life into it, you chooch. But yeah, like, it's good to do. But I wouldn't say it's like stand-up.
Please tell me you've had an experience where you've done someone's podcast, got on, like, said Zoom or whatever, or gone to a studio and just had a like bizarre, weird experience. Like, have you ever like had a guy be like, "Mark, come to my podcast," and you get to his house and he does not have any podcasting equipment. Like,
The worst is you get to somebody's house, you Uber there, it's out of the way, you're hungover, you don't really want to go, and then they just put a cell phone on the table and they're like, "So, tell me about yourself." You're like, come on, man. Now I got to do all the heavy lift. This is like you did your homework. You got great questions. You know your research. But yeah, there's some bad ones. And the worst is I can't say no. So I'll be in Phoenix and some guy goes, "Hey, I'm a local comic. Can I record you?" And I say, "Yeah, come to my hotel room." Then they come to your hotel room. They want to chit chat for an hour. Then they set up. That takes 30 minutes. They got lights and a rig and a camera. And then you do the podcast. Then they won't leave. And you got to literally kick them out. It's like, "Hey, buddy, you got to go. Order my Louis C.K. Get out of here. Get out of my hotel." And so there's all kinds of horror stories. But just for the folks out there, if you want to do a pod and have someone on it, be prepared, have some questions, be ready to go, and get the hell out when you're done.
I did a podcast like 2 weeks ago, and I could tell the person was reading about me from Wikipedia. My Wikipedia has limited information and then just lies from people who listen to my podcast.
Yeah.
But the person was not picking up on that. She's like, "Oh, so you spent most of your life in China?" I was like, "No, I've never been in China." Like, so many just horrific.
He's like, "I hear you like archery."
Yeah. Mark, I really appreciate you doing the podcast and giving up your time. I'm a big fan, so thanks very much for doing it. Love the sunglasses, the background, the vibe. You know what I mean? It's just it's a good time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great questions. Good chatting with you. I like to mix it up with the UK Jews, and my pleasure. Happy New Year. Praise Allah, and thanks for having me.
And when I hit end here, because you mentioned the guy in the hotel who wouldn't leave. When I hit end here, are we just doing a break? You want me to just break off? Because some people might end the Zoom and then we'll have to say goodbye again.
Yeah. That's fine.
So Mark, I got to say, thanks very much for doing the podcast. I appreciate it. And I'll hopefully see you at a gig in New York at some point.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.
Comedy.